So we've seen how you've got to consider different velocities and what's relative to what and frames of reference. Let's go on to see how this affects the measurement of time and speed. Einstein had many thought experiments, and the one that he started with for special relativity was he considered himself in a moving train, and he thought, could he actually see a reflection in a mirror if that train was actually going at light speed? In other words, would the light, the photons of light, just remain next to him because he was going at light speed, or would they go away from him at light speed in the train that's moving at light speed? Therefore, would he see a reflection or not? And as far as the stationary observer is concerned, do they see the speed of light at 3 times 10 to the power 8, or double that because the light is travelling at light speed in a train travelling at light speed? Yes, your brains are hurting already, I can tell. The key thing is the speed of light is the same regardless of the motion observer. Any observer observes the speed of light as being 3 times 10 to the power 8. So in fact, in this case, Einstein would have seen his reflection. The way that special relativity time dilation is set up is that Einstein considered a light clock. So the light clock has a distance here, h, and a light beam or photon moving backwards and forwards and producing the tick and tock of a clock as it reflects backwards and forwards between the mirrors. In which case you can work out the time by the distance h divided by the speed of light, and that's fine. Let's consider what happens if it actually travels horizontally at the same time. If we do that, then the photon has actually had to travel a little bit extra distance. The hypotenuse of the triangle with sides h and x, where x is the extra bit of distance that it's traveling horizontally. Now, if the speed of light is fixed, something's got to give here. It's covering a greater distance, therefore it's going to need more time to do that. And therefore, the photon is actually taking, we've got to change our measurement of time. Time actually has to slow down for the photon to achieve this. So, if the speed of light is going to be a constant, 299,792,458, or of course we just use 3 times 10 to the power 8, then everything else has to change to accommodate that. Length changes, time changes, and even mass changes as you approach the speed of light. And so the key thing to remember of all this is that moving clocks run slow. And that means that all processes, all physical processes, including biological aging, happens at a slower rate if you're traveling close to the speed of light. The equation that's given on the formula sheet has what's called dilated time. That's the longer time. Dilated means widening, so it's a longer time is dilated time. And also proper time, which is the time which is measured by somebody who's traveling in the train in their frame of reference. You've also got the speed of the movement and the speed of light in there. And you're going to be doing a work example on that there. That factor that you multiply the proper time by is called the Lorentz factor. And as you can see, if we take the plot of speed of the object along here as 1 times 10 to the power 8, 2 times 10 to the power 8, up to the limit, which is the fastest possible speed of 3 times 10 to the power 8, the dilated time factor only starts to kick in after about 1 times 10 to the power 8, or 1,000,000 meters per second. You're not generally going to be going, 100 million meters per second. You're not generally going to be going that fast. So it's only at these what were called relativistic speeds, anything above 2 times 10 to the power 8, that it kicks in. But it's only as you approach this speed limit, the speed of light, that it becomes really noticeable. The twin paradox is often used to illustrate this. In reality, the twin paradox is a non-inertial frame of reference, and it involves general relativity, but it's a good discussion point. So if you've got two twins, one stays on Earth, works for NASA, the other works for NASA but as an astronaut, and the astronaut twin goes on a high speed, close to light speed space voyage, and then comes back to Earth. The clock that's traveling on the spacecraft is the one that runs slowly. It takes longer to do the same thing as the clock that's running on Earth. This here is the dilated time that has actually passed on Earth. So that's the time that we've got there, much later on Earth there. The only thing that got close to this is Sergei Andreev, who spent over 2 years on the Mir space station, and by doing that you can actually show that he extended his life by 21 milliseconds. If you put the time in seconds for the time he was in space as the proper time, and we look at the dilated time calculation, when you're doing this calculation you're going to have to remember to square the v over c squared and take the square root. Then you get a dilated time of 0.0207 seconds bigger than the proper time. So that's where the 20 milliseconds came from. There is other evidence, time dilation, and also, as you're going to be seeing in a video later on, about a subatomic particle. But the clocks that are used in the satellites for GPS, they only work because they are incredibly accurate, and they have to take account of the effects of both types of relativity, special relativity and general relativity. So special relativity is because they're moving so fast. General relativity is because they're close to a large gravitational object, in other words, the Earth. Another actual experiment that was done was two physicists, Heifel and Keating, took atomic clocks, again very accurate atomic clocks, on 2 commercial flights and went round the world, firstly eastward, so you're countering the Earth's rotation and therefore travelling quickly, but not as quickly as if you go westward and actually go with the rotation of the Earth, and they were travelling much faster because of the rotation of the Earth on the second journey. So the dilated time was much greater in terms of the number of nanoseconds. And you can see the amount of uncertainty that they had and the close correlation between the results, between the predicted and the measured results that they got. So if you now go on to question 7a, and when you're doing question 4, if you do that as notes in your notes jotters, and then we'll do another screencast on length contraction.